You're standing on the dock, phone in your hand, staring at the prettiest hull you've ever seen. The listing calls her a classic motor cruiser. It says built 1972. The varnish glows. The price makes your heart beat faster than it should. Here's what I need you to hear before you write a single check. That boat is not what the listing claims she is. Underneath the paint, she's a warship, and the year on that ad is off by 3 decades. I know. Because I almost bought one just like her, and the number I nearly lost still makes me sick. Stay with me, because by the end, I'm going to show you the one thing hiding in a boat's pennant number that exposes her real age in about 5 minutes, and it works on wooden cruisers, converted trawlers, and half the classic sailboats on the market right now. Whether this is your first cruising boat or your third, this is the lie that empties savings accounts. Let me take you back about 11 years to a boatyard on a gray tidal river, because that's where I learned this the hard way. I was looking for a live aboard cruiser, something with soul, something that didn't look like a floating plastic bathtub like every other boat in the marina. And there she was, 60-something feet of sweeping sheer, a raised wheelhouse, twin diesels, and interior joinery that looked like a gentleman's club. The broker called her a 1970s gentleman's motor yacht. The asking price was $90,000, and for that length, for that presence, I thought I'd found a miracle. I want you to notice something about how I was thinking. I was shopping with my eyes and my heart. I was reading the listing like it was a fact sheet instead of a sales pitch, and the single most important number in that boat's entire life story, her real birth year, was completely missing from the ad. Not lied about in plain sight, just quietly left out. Because here's what she really was. She was a wartime patrol boat. A hull laid down in the early 1940s, built to hunt in the dark, converted to a peacetime cruiser after the war, then dressed up again and again by owner after owner until nobody selling her even mentioned where she came from. Transformed beyond recognition. That's not a poetic phrase. That's a survey category, and it should scare you. So let me tell you what these boats actually are, because once you understand the breed, you'll spot them in listings for the rest of your life. After the Second World War, thousands of small, fast military vessels flooded the civilian market for almost nothing. In Britain, the Fairmile Marine Company had built an astonishing fleet. The Fairmile B motor launch alone ran to more than 650 hulls, each one about 112 feet, designed under a man named Noel Macklin, who before the war built fast road cars. Think about that. A car man designing a warship you're now looking at buying as a retirement cruiser. Alongside the Fairmiles, you had Vosper and Thornycroft motor torpedo boats, and across the Atlantic, the American PT boats from Elko and Higgins, 78 and 80 feet of plywood mahogany built to carry torpedoes at 40 knots. When the war ended, these boats were dumped, sold off in job lots, and a whole generation of dreamers bought them cheap and turned them into houseboats and cruisers. Up and down the Thames, through the 1950s and 60s, you could find former gunboats with flower boxes in the wheelhouse windows. It was romantic, it was cheap, and it planted a time bomb that's still ticking in listings today because those conversions never stopped. They just kept getting resold, refit, and relisted each time, with the paperwork getting a little vaguer about the beginning. Now here's the part the broker did not want me to sit with too long. These hulls were never built to last 80 years. They were built to survive a war. That's a completely different engineering target. Let me explain why that matters to your wallet. A fast wartime patrol hull was almost always double diagonal planked. That means 2 layers of thin mahogany planking laid in opposite diagonals, and sandwiched between those 2 layers was a membrane, usually calico or canvas, soaked in marine glue or white lead paste. It made the hull light, strong, and fast. It also created the single most treacherous hiding place for rot that exists in wooden boat construction. Because think about what happens over decades. Fresh water, rain, condensation, a leaking deck fitting gets between those 2 skins. It can't drain, it can't dry. It sits in that fabric layer and quietly turns the interface of your beautiful planking into wet cardboard. And here's the cruel part. From the outside, that hull can look flawless. The varnish is perfect. Tap it and you might not even hear it, depending where the rot sits. A standard moisture meter reads the surface. It does not see what's happening a quarter-inch in between the skins, where the calico is holding water against wood like a sponge held against your ceiling. I didn't know any of that when I stood on that dock. I thought a pretty hull was a sound hull. So let me tell you what it would have cost me if I'd been right about nothing and wrong about everything. Refastening a wooden hull of that size, just replacing the fastenings, not the planks, can run you $15,000 to $25,000 if you're paying a yard. Replacing rotten double diagonal planking is far worse, because you often can't just swap one plank. You have to open up sections, deal with the fabric membrane, source matching mahogany that basically isn't grown commercially anymore, and pay a shipwright who actually knows this construction, and those shipwrights are retiring faster than they're being replaced. I've watched a quick soft spot repair on a boat like this turn into a $40,000 invoice because once they opened her up, the rot ran 3 planks in every direction. So that's the first gut punch. But the rot isn't even the thing that would have ruined me. The thing that would have ruined me was the fastenings, and this is where the confession gets personal. I told you these hulls used iron in places, and here's why that's a slow-motion disaster. Wartime production was fast and desperate. Bronze and copper were rationed for weapons. So a lot of these boats got iron or steel fastenings and iron floors, the structural brackets that tie the frames to the keel, where a proper yacht would have used bronze. Now fast forward 80 years in saltwater, iron and wet oak does something called nail sickness. The iron corrodes, it swells, it chemically burns the surrounding wood black and soft, and it lets go. You can have a hull where every single fastening is quietly failing at once, and the only symptom is a faint rust weep and a plank that feels a hair loose under your palm. I found this out because I did one thing right, almost by accident. I refused to sign until I hired my own surveyor, not the broker's friendly recommendation, my own guy, a man who'd spent 30 years on wooden hulls, and when he crawled into the bilge of that gorgeous cruiser with a flashlight and an awl, he went very quiet. Then he called me over and pushed the point of that awl into a frame like it was a wet sponge. No resistance. The wood just swallowed it. He looked up at me and asked one question that changed how I shop forever. He asked, "Do you know what this boat was built for?" And I didn't. Nobody had told me. Therefore, I had no idea what I was actually inspecting. That's the trap, and I want to make sure you feel the edges of it. A converted vessel isn't priced or surveyed like what it is, it's priced like what it looks like. The listing photos sell you a 1970s gentleman's yacht. The hull under your feet is a 1940s warship running on borrowed time, and every one of those decades is a cost nobody put in the ad. So let me give you the practical defense, because I promised you tools, not just horror stories. First, learn to read a hull shaped like a fingerprint. A converted fast patrol boat almost always keeps 2 tells no amount of new joinery can hide. One is a hard chine, a sharp angle where the bottom meets the side, instead of a smooth round bilge, because these boats were built to plane, to skim the surface at speed, not to sit deep and comfortable like a cruiser. The other is length out of all proportion to the accommodation. A hull that's 60 or 70 feet long, but strangely narrow, with a fine sharp bow, is telling you it was designed to go fast in a straight line, not to carry a family across an ocean. When the shape and the story don't match, the story is wrong. Second, and write this down, ask the seller a single flat question and watch the pause. Ask, what was the original hull number and what year was the hull actually laid? Not the conversion, not the refit, the hull. If the answer is a vague, "Oh, she's a 70s boat," or the paperwork starts in 1968, you are looking at a laundered birth certificate. Because here's the mechanism the whole trade runs on, and this is the villain finally stepping into the light. When these vessels were converted, the registration frequently reset to the conversion date. The document says 1972, because that's when somebody bolted a saloon onto a warship. The wood is 30 years older than the paper, and the paper is the only thing most buyers ever read. Therefore, the age you're buying, the age that determines whether your fastenings are dying and your planking is soft, is a number the system is practically designed to hide from you. That's not bad luck. That's how it stays sellable. Now, before I take you deeper, and I've saved the worst and most useful part for the end, I need to talk directly to someone specific who's been listening to all this thinking it doesn't apply to them. Picture yourself right there in that bilge, flashlight shaking a little, realizing the pretty story on the dock was hiding 30 years of salt water. That sick feeling in your stomach? That's exactly what I built, the Complete Sail Smart System to spare you. It's 3 volumes and over 400 pages of real cost numbers, not dealer optimism or forum folklore. Sail Smart hands you the honest framework before you spend a single thing, including 6 blue water ready boats and exactly what they share. Beyond the brochure gives you the forensic comparison of catamaran versus monohull and lays out the dealer's impossible position so you understand why boats stall and how buyers win. And the full collection includes the Asset Decision Framework, one model you can use for boats, energy, and every big purchase you'll ever face. Here's a check you can run for free tonight. Open any listing you've been circling, look for the original build year, and watch how often it's quietly missing the exact pattern this book teaches you to break. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters no matter when you're watching, because every day you shop blind is a day a seller's story can cost you. Now let me tell you what my surveyor said next, because it's the question that changed everything. If you already own a boat, don't drift off here. This next part is aimed straight at you, and it's the cheapest inspection you'll do all year. Because you don't need a torpedo boat for this lesson to bite you. Any older boat that's been heavily modified, a cruiser with an added aft cabin, a sailboat that's been redecked, a trawler that changed hands 5 times carries the same disease in a milder form. The listing that sold her to you told you a shape, not a history. And the good news is you can check the 2 most dangerous things this week in your own slip without a haul out and without paying anyone. Here's the first check. Go down into your bilge with a bright flashlight and a plain wooden pencil, not a screwdriver, not an awl. You're not trying to do damage. Find the lowest structural timbers in the areas around any old iron fittings or keel bolts. Look for 3 things. Black staining that radiates out from a fastening, a fine, rusty weep like dried tea running down the wood, and any place where the surface has that dull, flat, slightly furry look instead of clean grain. Press the eraser into the pencil against those spots firm, not violent. Sound wood pushes back. Sick wood gives softly like pressing a ripe peach. If you find give around a fastening, you haven't found a repair, you've found a question. And that question is, how many others are like this one? Here's the second check, and it costs you nothing but a knuckle. On a dry day, tap your knuckle or the plastic handle of a screwdriver along the hull, inside and out, where you can reach around the waterline, around every through hull, around the transom corners and the garboard, that lowest plank right beside the keel where water always pools. Soundwood answers with a sharp, high, almost musical report. Rotten or delaminated wood answers with a dull, dead thud, like knocking on a full cardboard box. Go slow, move a hand's width at a time. You are listening for the moment the note goes dead. When it does, mark it with tape and don't panic, but that's the spot your next surveyor earns his fee on, and now you're the one telling him where to look instead of the other way around. Do those 2 things and you've just performed the exact inspection that saved me from the worst purchase of my life. It took my surveyor 20 minutes. It'll take you an afternoon, and it's the difference between owning a boat and being owned by one. So stay with me, because everything I've told you so far, the hidden age, the sick fastenings, the rot between the skins, all of it points to one final thing, one document, one number that ends the argument before it starts, and almost nobody buying these boats knows it exists. Let me finish the story of my patrol boat, because this is where it turns. After my surveyor found that soft frame, I walked away. That part was easy, but I couldn't stop thinking about her, so I did something I'd never done before. I started trying to find out what she actually was. And that hunt led me into a world most boat shoppers never touch, the world of naval historians and vessel registries and the people who track these hulls by their original identity. Here's what I learned, and this is the secret I promised you. Every one of these wartime boats was born with a service identity, a pennant number, a hull number, a builder's yard number stamped or plated somewhere on her. On a British motor launch, it might be an ML number. On a torpedo boat, an MTB number. On an American boat, a PT number. That identity is almost impossible to fully erase because these vessels are cataloged. There are naval archives, there are dedicated preservation societies, there are registries maintained by people who have devoted their lives to tracking where every one of these hulls ended up. The wartime shipyards kept records, Lloyd's kept records, and unlike a broker's listing, those records do not get rewritten every time a boat is sold. So here is the move. Here is the thing you can do this week that no glossy listing wants you to do. Before you fall in love with any old converted vessel, you find the original identifier, the yard number, the pennant number, the builder's plate, and if the seller swears there isn't one, you look harder, because there almost always is, tucked under an engine bed or stamped on a floor or hidden behind later joinery. Then you take that number to the preservation registry for that class of boat and you match it. And in about the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, you learn the truth. The listing spent decades hiding the real year she was laid, the yard that built her, what she was built to do, and often every owner and every conversion in between. I did exactly that with my patrol boat. The listing said 1972. The registry, matched against her hull number, said her keel was laid in 1942. 30 years. 3 decades of salt water that the price, the ad, and the smiling broker had all quietly erased. And once I knew her real birth year, every single thing my surveyor found made perfect, terrible sense. The iron fastenings, the soft frame, the rot waiting in the double diagonal skins. She wasn't a bargain with a few issues. She was an 80-year-old warship wearing a cruiser's clothes, priced like the costume instead of the corpse. Think about the shape of what just happened. The knowledge existed the whole time in the shipyard ledgers, in the naval archives, in the hands of a few obsessive historians who refused to let these hulls lose their names. The people selling her had every reason to bury it, and the registration system helped them do it. But that knowledge survived, kept alive by people who cared about the truth more than the sale, and now it's yours. You just have to go ask for it before you sign instead of after. That's the whole game. The seller controls the listing, the seller does not control the archive, and the archive doesn't care how pretty she is. Now let me widen this out, because I don't want you thinking this only matters if you're shopping for a converted gunboat. This is the reason I still tell this story 11 years later. The exact same disease hides in the market. You're actually shopping the used cruising sailboat market. It just wears different clothes. A sailboat that's been refit might have a hull core that's soaked and delaminated under a shiny new gel coat, and the listing sells you the shine. A classic hull might be listed by the year of its last major rebuild instead of the year it was launched. A boat that's changed hands 6 times might have 6 layers of amateur modification, each one covering the last one's mistakes, and not one line in the ad tells you which parts are original and which parts were done by a previous owner with more enthusiasm than skill. Transform beyond recognition isn't only about torpedo boats. It's about any hull where the story you're being sold has drifted away from the truth of what's under your feet. So the same 3 defenses carry over to your short list, whatever you're buying. Match the shape to the story. If the hull's proportions don't fit the way it's being sold, the selling is the lie. Ask flatly for the original build year and the original hull identification number, and watch what happens in the seller's face when you do. And then go find the independent record, the class association, the builder's archive, the owner's registry, and confirm the truth from a source that has no reason to lie to you and nothing to gain from your check clearing. Because here's the thing I finally understood. Standing in that boatyard, watching my surveyor pull his awl out of soft wood, every dollar of my $90,000 would have been buying a story, and the story was written by the one person in the whole transaction who got paid only if I believed it. Let me leave you with a number that still stops me cold. That patrol boat sold about 4 months later to somebody else, to a man who, I'd bet anything, read the same listing I did and never asked what she was born as. Last I heard, she was hauled out and opened up, and the repair estimate had passed $120,000, well over the price he paid for her, with the yard still finding rot. He didn't buy a boat. He bought a hole in the water with a birth certificate that lied, and he's still filling it. That could so easily have been me. It was luck and one stubborn surveyor that it wasn't. It doesn't have to be luck for you. Here's what I want you to carry away from this, and it's not really about wood or torpedoes or any one boat. It's about who you're going to be when you stand on that dock with the sun on a beautiful hull and your heart racing and the seller smiling at you. You can be the buyer who reads the story and pays for it. Or you can be the buyer who quietly asks for the number, walks to the archive, and finds out what's actually true before the money moves. You already know which one you are, or you wouldn't have watched a man tell you about the worst deal he almost made all the way to the end. So let me ask you something, and I actually want the answer. What boat is on your short list right now, the one you keep going back to, the one that makes your heart beat a little too fast? Tell me the make, the model, the year, in the listing, in the comments below, and tell me where you're watching from, because I read these and I answer them. If you've got a hull number or a class you're not sure about, drop it. Someone in this community probably knows exactly where to check it, because that's who gathers here buyers who refuse to get burned, who'd rather ask the awkward question than write the six-figure regret. If that's you, come stand with us. Subscribe, not to do me a favor, but because the next boat I'm taking apart is one almost everyone on the used market considers a safe, sensible, can't go wrong first cruiser, and there's a single hidden detail in the hull-to-deck joint of the most popular model that turns that safe boat into the most expensive mistake on this whole channel. I found it the hard way too. I'll show you exactly where it hides. Don't sign anything until you've seen it. Before you go, one thing. Inside the cruising compass, I pick up right where we stopped and walk you through the full pennant number check on your own listing. And you can ask me your own question. A real person, me, answers you myself. Buyers like you are already inside, so you're never doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime. Come join me. Now, if you've ever wondered why so many boats sit unsold for months, I'll walk you through the honest reasons behind it. That one's starting right here, so stay with me.